They have been through so much.
Believes the quake has taken hundreds of thousands of lives.
Millions of people out here
find
with
as many people
shelter,
who are
no
still alive as
water, and no
possible before they die from.
Contrast in the snow for the agony I'd rather know, 'cause blinded I am blindsided. Would you really rush out? Would you really rush out for me now? Would you really rush out for me now? Would you really rush out for me now? For me now. For me
All right, so we're going to talk about two catalysts in the last little bit we have in this session. And the video you just saw represents the work of Cameron Sinclair on the near side. And he created Architecture for Humanity, and Marc Koska, who created SafePoint, who you heard from in a minute. And what they share, like with many people in the audience, is fantastic passion, the kind that Murray just talked about, that actually led them to do things that I think we want to make many other people able to do. So why don't we start with your story, Cameron?
Okay, so the video you saw actually is not for you. And I'm going to tell you a bit about how that came to be. First off, Architecture for Humanity, I'm a recovering architect. I trained as an architect. And I didn't become an architect because I went to great cathedrals, but I lived in a real hellhole of South London. And I realized early on that our communities and the way the fabric of the environment was set up actually dictated the way people behave. So I decided I'd be an architect to try and improve those environments. So, you know, what I'm doing now pretty much was dictated from an early age. When I was early on, in my early 20s, I decided that instead of doing high-rises in Manhattan and you know, law firms in LA, which I was doing, that I begin to do a side project, which was how do we get licensed professionals in the architectural and construction industry to get involved in humanitarian problems. And it started off with a simple idea, and I'm not going to tell you the full story, but 10 years later, we've now worked in about 38 countries. We have 70 city chapters, and we have 5,600 architects actively working on projects around the world. Right now, 40% of our work is in Haiti, but we're rebuilding in Pakistan. We just finished first dozen permanent homes yesterday, and we're going to push into 100 by the end of next month, as well as in Chile and elsewhere. So yeah, that's us. We're about providing not just design solutions, but construction capabilities. So you can take some of these innovative ideas and actually implement them. I think probably the most important message is that what I've found over the last decade is that there's a million ideas that can change the world, but unless you build it, it doesn't matter. And when you're focused on these systemic issues or in post-disaster, that actually implementing innovative solutions is the key and really the catalyst for our organization to grow exponentially.
That's definitely a theme we're going to come back to. Really, the idea that the idea is not it.
Right.
The idea is the start. And it's the passion and the tremendous amount of work, a decade in your case, and more than that in Marc's case. Why don't you tell people a little bit about your story?
Well, because I'm older than Cameron, you mean. My story revolves around solving a problem, and it's probably actually just best illustrated if I can show you a short clip of a film from India that we made. These nurses were filmed secretly in a government hospital for 30 minutes. The tray they are using has medicine on it for all the patients on the floor, yet they only have 2 syringes. During this time, not once was a new syringe taken from a packet. The nurses openly throw the syringes back in the tray, then pick them up again to give the next injection, and not one patient or bystander ever challenges them. And that film was made last year, and as I said, made undercover. In 1984, there was a prediction 26 years ago that syringes would be a major transmission route for HIV, and I took this very seriously. I thought that was kind of really unacceptable. After 2.5 years of research, I designed this, which is my syringe, and basically it operates exactly the same as a normal syringe, and then is used, and if you try and reuse it again, it locks and then breaks and it can't be used. The trick was to make it in such a way, design it in such a way that any manufacturer in the world can make this. And we've been relatively successful in the field. We're the leading design group or licensing group. And we now have 14 manufacturers around the world making these. It took me 17 years to sell the first one in 2001 to UNICEF. And since then, we've sold about 2 billion. And the syringe has been credited with saving about 10 million fatal infections.
Exactly. Now, one thing that unites the two of you is persistence.
Yeah.
And I think that's, in some sense, you guys are here because you persisted and you were successful, but there must be literally millions of young people like the two of you that aren't at this meeting because they haven't gotten up that path. And I want to talk a little bit about your path and a little bit about how you kind of had to do this on your own, in some sense, building these things from scratch. Either or. Sorry, Cameron.
Well, I was very lucky. The co-founder of my organization, Kate Storr, worked for a company that had this website called Pathfinder, and it was one of the first early websites. And so when we started this, and she was a journalist, and we began talking about, we always focus on the issue, we never focus on the solution. So if we utilize the internet as a mechanism to show innovation, to show solutions, that's how innovation spreads. And so we started with, I think, about $700, and we started a website. And we just said, look, we're going to give pro bono professional design services for anyone who wants it. And it just spiraled out of control. It was literally going to be a weekend project. And within a few years, we suddenly realized that we were, in terms of the pro bono architectural groups, we became the largest entity, primarily because we jumped on technology early on. We were on Twitter early on. We were on Facebook early on. And then not only going on that technology, but figuring out how you utilize it. And what's happening, and what's really amazing, is that I sit in a very interesting position that I get to see all these new, young, innovative designers around the world that are actively doing stuff. So you get to see me and maybe a few projects. But right now, there are tens of thousands of innovative building technologies that are happening, all open sourced, all collaboratively around the world, but they're not looking to get retweeted by Ashton Kutcher. What they're looking for is a way to influence and support their communities, and then share their solutions with other like-minded people. So for us, technology isn't about the number of likes you get on Facebook or the number of views you get on YouTube. It's who's actually utilizing that technology and how are they sharing it with each other to exponentially make that change.
Excellent. Now, Marc, you had quite I would say, a longer path than Cameron, and you had to build up some partnerships pretty much from scratch, including manufacturers, the obvious one. But many other people knew this was a problem. So why do you think you were the guy that could get this done?
I think one of the reasons, my journey was completely different to Cameron's, but one of the reasons that I stuck with it, if that's one of the basic elements of your question, is that instead of designing straight away, I researched the problem. And having understood the problem by going to immunization camps and working with drug addicts, not that they're a target market for us, but they have a very complicated methodology of using syringes, and going to syringe factories and patent office and trying to understand the whole scene. Once I'd really understood the problem, the solution was much easier. And I knew it was true to me, and so that allowed me to stick with it. So
That must have been like 86 or something.
that was, yeah, don't remind me, but it was, yeah. I started in 84, I designed this product in 87, and then we repatented it in about 96, and now we've got, about eight more years left.
But I'm kind of chastising the world, myself included, for not helping you out between 1986 and 2001.
Yeah, I called as well.
So you must have some opinions on what happened in that era to make it so long.
Yeah, I mean, not really.
You were clearly right. I mean, obviously you told us so. You could say so now.
Yeah, I was right. Not really for, it's more of an in-depth conversation, but there were a lot of vested interest, there were a lot of whys and why nots in the field, whether it was with the large NGOs, the World Health Organization type organizations, or whether it was local ministries or manufacturers. There were lots of barriers along the way, but by designing it to fit an existing manufacturing system, that was really the breakthrough. That was going to allow our first early adopters to pick it up and start manufacturing them. So sticking with that inner belief was really the key through all those ups and downs, and forming those relationships. You really have no idea what's going on in the guy's mind that you're talking to. You can be talking to, for example, I met the Prime Minister of Pakistan, and he signed papers. We will adopt your product. They've never made one, but he's telling you that he's going to do it 3 or 4 years ago. But there's no intention of him doing it. He wanted a good press article, which made him look good, and then there was an election the following month. So there's so many different things built into this journey that you really have no idea of. All you've got to do is just keep on going, I think.
One of the things you brought up that's been true for Cameron, I know, as well, is kind of an issue of transparency and accountability. You've written already that one thing that's unique about these small organizations is they get money from donors that expect accountability, and sometimes they're working directly with donors that donate directly to particular projects. They have to be transparent. So you talk about a little bit of the issues you had to face that are similar?
What's really fascinating is we're kind of like a tugboat, and a lot of these large NGOs are like oil tankers. And I don't see them as opposition. They have these very vague claims. They're going to end poverty for children, right? And they're going to go from A to B, and they're going to get there in one direction. And these smaller nonprofits and organizations and for-profits collaborate, working together, can be just as impactful. And it doesn't mean that we're against. It's not a competition. But we can latch onto that oil tanker and pull it to a more sustainable and holistic solution that's community-based. Because certainly in many of the places I work, most NGOs say, there's a massive disaster in Haiti, we need to build lots of houses and everyone's going to be happy. That's not what people want. Yes, they want shelter, but they want a job. So how are we making sure that we're designing and building buildings that create the most amount of jobs in the community, that actually employ people locally and integrate disaster mitigation, both future and current? That has to be done with a lot of different groups, so working with economists and working with environmentalists, and bringing those groups together and then distributing that. So that's the idea of competing against large NGOs. The other is accountability. So my largest donor base right now in Haiti is high school children. There are hundreds of groups all over the country right now that are raising money to build those schools. That video was done by somebody I've never met before, Ashley Gutierrez, who said, look, you're in the business of building buildings. I'm a filmmaker. So I'm going to give this to you as a present. She uploaded it on Vimeo. We kind of sent it viral. We sent it to the schools that wanted to raise funds. We used the Square to raise money in person, raised enough money to build the schools, and then interconnect through video connections. Now that's the first half of the story, and I'm sorry, but this is really important, is that suddenly when you have 100,000 donors, how are you accountable to them? Because everybody can ping me on Facebook. So we have to create a mechanism that's transparent so people can show on. So, we actually, there's a slide, I don't know if they can put it up, of mine. Do you guys have that slide or that video? If not, I can show it through this. So, if I want money from the US government, I'm an architect. So can anyone guess where it comes from? Well, I'm not going to leave you waiting. It's the National Endowment for the Arts. So basically, I have to steal money from sculptors and photographers to fund humanitarian work through architecture. I'm not going to do that. So I have to figure out a way to raise funding and That's yours.
That's mine.
That's fine. So anyway, what we did is we just created an iPad app that has every single project that we've done around the globe that updates on the ground.
Might be able to hold it to the camera if you.
Oh, okay. I don't know if you need it on
That
the
camera there?
But so, for instance, we can go over to Pakistan or Afghanistan, and our architects that were mentioned that are on the front lines are using their camera phones to upload every day. So, we built these houses in Pakistan through $50, $100 donations, and they can see today the roof got put on. Today it's complete. I'm going to put another $100 in. So that level of accountability is not happening at the large NGOs. They just have to put in some big white paper and say, we did the work that you told us to do. So this level of accountability needs to transform on the larger oil tankers. So.
That sounds easy. You've certainly had to deal with partnerships of all kinds, especially in the health sector. You can't just go be a doctor and give out needles. So how did you get groups to actually help you distribute? You have billions of these.
Well, we used a licensing basis. I never wanted to be a manufacturer of syringes because I thought it would, there are too many manufacturers in the world. We've got about 600 factories, which is way too many anyway. And so that was why it was so key to be able to retrofit the factories, and also to make the product the same price. That was really key, so that there was as minimal change to the distribution line as possible. So all our distribution is done by the normal channels that were already in place from those manufacturers. And so that was quite easy. But what we had to do was kind of jump in front of the manufacturing and supply lines and lobby governments, which is where I started my NGO. And for example, in India, I was able to raise a modest amount of money and inform through a mass media campaign on television, radio, and newspapers about 700 million views of this message over a 5-day period. And then we used that to lobby the government to change the law on the use of injections. And in fact, this hospital that you saw is now only using this type of syringe.
Yeah,
So.
I love this path. We could go to WHO and just get this problem solved, or we could advertise on TV to build up public support to get the government of India to adopt what's right.
Well, I think the
Accurate?
answer's in the question, because if WHO were going to do it, they would have done it. They know these figures, they know the problems, and they said they can't do it, and I said I can. So you just go and do it. So.
Fascinating. One of the things that's different in your two groups, but I think is worth a little bit of discussion, is you said to me, personally at least, that when you went with Creative Commons, essentially open sourced your plans, is when you took off. And I know that intellectual property was critical to your success. You could make your manufacturers successful. Comments on this model? Open source is what we talk about, but you clearly needed some amount of something else.
Yeah, I mean, we've funded our commercial side of the business through investors. But what I'm working on now is a plan where we can buy the investors out, which would include me, but then literally give the patents to any manufacturer and allow them to make it on a royalty-free basis. And that's what I'm really keen to do now, because that will allow us to get to scale. And not just syringes. I think there are many products that fit that profile, which are kind of under a glass ceiling of unfair competition. They don't even know there's competition, but they're not growing to scale because of these real competitive pressures. And I think we need to throw the baby out. Let's start again. Let's open source all these ideas, and let's just get on with the job.
So, talk about your experience with that.
Well, I had a midlife crisis when I hit about 30. And part of that was, I realized all the work we had done around the world. I felt very chuffed. We've impacted the lives of about 1.2 million people around the world. It's a tiny little organization. But looking at the statistics and looking at the issues out there, it's not even a drop in the ocean. It's not even a bead of sweat. And so the only way that we could really impact is by open sourcing everything and just say, look, we're in the business of social innovation, not financial gain. So by using Creative Commons as a mechanism on physical structures, we can share those innovative details. Now, fast forward, we were very fortunate we got the TED Prize, so we were able to help push something called the Open Architecture Network. In 2007, there was one building with a Creative Commons license. As of today, there are 5,000 buildings that we know of, and those have been replicated many times. So all the work we did on the Gulf Coast, which is almost 700 houses, are all under Creative Commons. Anyone can, if there's a storm on the Carolinas next year, you can download full construction documentation, you can implement those buildings, you make sure that you adhere to local code, and you're ready to go. Why should we have to spend money on jump-starting innovation in these disasters? And one quick example is, last year we hosted a design competition to design the classroom of the future. We said you could only enter if you went into a local school and you worked with teachers and kids. And we ended up with 10,000 people from around the world. They entered designs, and we ended up being able to build a couple of these schools. Fast forward a few months, Haiti happens. They lose 100% of their schools in Western Port-au-Prince, 25% of their schools in the country. Guess what they need? They need plans for schools. Guess what we've got? We've got 600 plans for schools. So suddenly we can go through that and call up these schools and say, hey, you know what? We can actually tweak your design based on materials and labor and implement it in this area. Are you up for it? And who's going to say no? So the idea is crowdsourcing innovation, but making sure that the people that are being sourced have the expertise and skills to do it. So this isn't kind of, hey, you got an idea, throw it up there. This is a health and safety issue. So making sure you've got licensed professionals doing it.
Excellent. So we're getting near our end of time. I think Jenny Wolfelson's in the audience, and he had a comment before on World Bank being one of the groups that hasn't historically worked with the kinds of people we have up here. Did you want to comment on that, Jim?
Fantastic set of presentations. It's a little difficult to do that. But what I was reminded of was that we had at the World Bank a thing called the Innovation Marketplace. And we have still, every year, some thousands of innovative ideas, creative ideas. But what's come through today, I think, is that the idea is part of it, but the management and sticking with it and bringing it about, in your case, 17 years before you got the sales of your syringes, is a critical element in what we're hearing about today. And so I think it's extremely interesting as evidence of great creativity, but behind each one of these stories is a story of management, continuing management and building. And I think we've been very lucky to have this group of people to present before us.
Thank you. Well, in the interest of time, I'm going to make that the last word, but thank you so much for a great session, and we'll be up here to continue it.